G'day guys, welcome back to another video. In today's video we're talking all things Chinese weightlifting. Chinese weightlifting is the most popular currently. Their dominance on the world stage, which was especially highlighted at this year's Olympics, with them going 5 out of 6 gold and then 1 silver. Everybody loves watching Chinese weightlifters go out and smash records, take gold medals, and literally take no prisoners. That combined with the training videos we see of them pumping out accessory lifts and heavy lifts makes them one of the most fun countries to watch. But in today's video we're going to ask the question, what can we actually learn from them? In 2014 I was lucky enough to head over to Beijing Sports University through a Mars strength camp and train there. I think there was about 25 people from different countries and it was an amazing experience. We literally got to train with these athletes, do the exact same sessions they did. The only thing we couldn't do with the athletes is sit down to eat with them. We trained as the team did. If they did 3 hours, we did 3 hours. If they did an hour of accessories each session, we did an hour of accessories each session. I'd only just started coaching weightlifting before I headed over there, and now it's roughly been around 7 years. So today's video I want to go over some of the lessons that I learnt back then that are still applicable to today. What did I learn back then and what is transferable to my athletes now so that have jobs, careers, studying, etc. Lesson number 1, and probably the most boring of the lessons, is recovery. These athletes' lives revolve around training. They are literally set up to recover from session to session. An example of a day is they wake up, they get fed, they head to the training hall around 8:30 a.m, they train for 2 to 3 hours, they get fed again, they take a nap, they wake up, they come and train again in the evening session. From there they get some free time before the coach comes around and takes their phone off them, and then they go to bed 8:30 onwards. After each session they help massage each other to help with the recovery process, but I'll get into that in a little bit because that's one of the next lessons. They were literally able to handle the volume and intensity that they did because their lives revolved around recovery. The average age of the athlete that was there was probably anywhere from 18 to 20 years old, and most of them had been training for 8+ years already. Lesson number 2 is the warm-up. They did the exact same warm-up every single session. It didn't matter what day of the week it was, they were doing the same warm-up. They had someone at the front of the training hall and they literally went through the same exercises every single session. This is something that you'll see with a lot of Eastern European countries as well, is their warm-ups aren't super fancy. They literally get the joints moving in really simple ways, like rotations, things like that, and they slowly get into more dynamic movements with their body, and then eventually they're warmed up. They're literally sweating and it's time to get the barbell. What we would typically see is they would do this in runners, and then from there they would go into the change rooms, get their weightlifting shoes, come out. Some would go straight to a barbell, and then some would just go to doing maybe a static stretch if they had something that was extra tight. They might ask for a massage off one of the other athletes, or they would literally just get straight into the train. At the end of each session they would walk on each other, they would stretch, they would help each other stretch, they would do anything they could just to kind of help bring that cool down. Lesson number 3 is technique, practice, and no music. They take their training very seriously, or at the very least their coach takes their training very seriously. The coach is always walking around making sure they're doing the right thing, be it with technical movements or be it just not resting too long. The coach commanded a strict room, and music was only ever played 1 session a week. This was generally on Thursday, which had 1 session. It was one of their only single day sessions, and they were generally a smaller session where they would predominantly do 1 of the technical lifts and then predominantly accessories after that. It was not uncommon to see these athletes who could snatch 130 kilos practicing in a mirror with an empty barbell. One of the coolest experiences was watching Nat from Hook Grip film one of the girls there getting absolutely hammered by the coach. He'd drawn a cross on the floor and he was making sure that she was getting her footwork correct every single time. I'll post a link to in the description below, but it was probably, I think she was handling 80 kilo clean and jerks. This is 7 years ago, so I'm just obviously trying to remember, but she was handling something that was quite heavy. She was only a little lifter, and she was just getting, every single time he would prompt her, get the foot further forward, get the foot further forward. One thing I will say still in this same section is that the coach was a really great motivator. So although he commanded a very strict ship, he would also motivate athletes differently. There was a super heavyweight lifter that was there, and he was complaining of having a sore back, and so what the coach would do is he would give him tons and tons of core work, and it almost felt like he was well, if you've got a sore back, I'm going to give you so much core work to prove whether you actually do have a sore back or you're just doing it to try to get out of training. With the same lifter, after a couple of days when he started getting back into the training, he almost challenged him to a snatch off, and they ended up going backwards and forwards, lift for lift, until the coach snatched 130 kilos. The cool thing about this was we only saw him train twice in the 2 weeks that we were there, and one of them, he would have only probably been around low 70s, maybe mid 70 body weight. He snatched 130 kilos, so literally not professionally training just every now and then, and he can still snatch 130. Lesson number 4 was the atmosphere. The atmosphere was electric, and I've been in a lot of weightlifting clubs. Our weightlifting club has pretty good atmosphere, but there's just something about when you train with professional athletes that they bring to it when they're starting to go heavy. There's just like an energy in the room, and like every now and then we will have those days in our gym where it just doesn't matter what someone does, it's electric. We had something pretty similar recently where we had Eileen Chikamatana come and visit us, and just the energy she brought to the gym, it's almost like she brings that on a daily basis, and you could feel the same thing in the Chinese training hall, is that even on a flat day when one of them started getting up, everybody got around them. Lesson number 5, and this is probably the one that most people are going to be interested in, and this is the accessory section. So they did accessories at the end of each session. I'm going to go into later why I don't necessarily think this is a great option for the majority of people, but the accessories, how they approach their accessories, and the types of exercises are really good lessons to go through. So let's go through the back exercises first. So the back exercises, we had bent over row, row on a bench, which some people call a seal row, upright row, reverse flies, dumbbell rows, and pull-ups. The abs and the core exercises were leg raises or knee raises, sit-ups, trunk twists with a plate, trunk lateral bends with straps on a barbell, kind of like a side bend. The shoulders were handstand push-ups and strict presses while seated on a bench. And then there was the triceps. And the triceps were dips and then plate extension. So like almost like that. Sometimes they use them with a barbell and sometimes they'd use them with a plate. We weren't really allowed to talk to them initially, so we thought, but every now and then, like the Arthur, the guy I was rooming with, who's from Chicago, he actually spoke Chinese, so he would sometimes get to ask these guys questions because we could mingle with them a little bit when we were doing accessories. And we would ask them, how many reps you do, and they would just say things really simple. I just go until I can't do another rep. How many sets? 3 to 5 sets. It was almost always the same answer. This is where they would actually start to kind of like let their hair down a little bit. Obviously the coach would be pretty strict on them with their rest periods and things like that, but they would start to joke, and like, although you would see just like pairs training together, you'd probably see a group of the guys at the back, focusing on certain muscle groups and the girls focusing on other muscle groups, and they would kind of swap over a little bit. One of the other things that was kind of cool in that accessory section is if the coach felt like they weren't fit enough, he would kind of threaten them with the thought of doing general training, be it like circuit, running, things like that. There was talk of on one of the days they were going to do a run around Beijing Sports University, and this place was massive. They had every sport you could imagine with their own facility in this thing. It must have probably been, I think they said it's about a 45-minute run, so it could have been anywhere from like 5 to 10 Ks on a really hot day. We were lucky that we didn't have to do it because it was 38 degrees that day, so they canned it, but they aren't opposed to doing things that are general in nature to help keep their base level of fitness up. So some final thoughts. So all of these lessons are great. Recovery, and they're all principles that every country applies, and we apply obviously within our own training. The practicality of it all is that when you watch these lifters, people will try to replicate them and try and copy them, and it is too difficult. It is too difficult to copy everything that they do. Just because in general, we have lives. We have lives that don't necessarily involve our own training. As much as we love it, as much as we would want to do that, it is tough to be able to fit everything in. Like these guys are training 8 to 10 sessions a week, double days some days, 2.5 to 3 hour sessions most of the time, with 2 hours being lifting and an hour being of accessories. It is just so much to fit in. And like if we were to go through your best bang for your buck, it would be, if you're trying to be the best weightlifter you can initially, it is practice the lifts and do the lifts regularly. It's probably one of the biggest lessons that you can take from it. Make sure that you're focusing on the techniques, other things. Recovery is huge too. Staying up till all hours of the night and watching YouTube videos on what to do could be detrimental to your recovery. So focusing on getting to bed earlier, waking up earlier, great lesson. The other thing is that although we do love watching their technique and they are very dominant on the world stage, it isn't necessarily the greatest technique that everybody should be following. As a general rule of thumb, they are probably one of the strongest nations out there. We saw a 56 kilo lifter back squatting 226 kilos, which is huge. His best snatch was around 120 and his best clean and jerk was like 150. As strong as it is and as strong as those snatch and clean and jerks are, it's not necessarily efficient. If one of my lifters was doing 220 in here, I would like to see slightly more than that. I'd probably like to be seeing 130, 135 in the snatch and 160 in the clean and jerk. So trying to copy how their technique works is that they have an abundance of strength. And strength is something that takes the longest time to develop. So trying to replicate their technique when they have these reserves of strength can slow down your progress. And I know this because when I got back for the next 12 months, I was full fanboy Chinese. I had the Antars, I had the Lu's Chinese weightlifting suit, and I was trying to snatch and clean and jerk exactly like them. it slowed me down tremendously. My body is just not built that way. The amount of muscle and strength that it would take for me to lift that way. In the end, I think I ended up losing 15 kilos off my squat while I went back and rejigged how my lifts were, and my lifts started to move again and started to move really freely. All the principles that we've talked about can be taken and can be taken really, really well. What I would start to think about is if you've got, say, 3 or 4 sessions a week and you're like me, you could probably only train 60 to 90 minutes each session. The biggest bang for your buck is going to be training like a weightlifter that trains in any other country. You're going to want to practice the snatch and the clean and jerk quite regularly. You're going to want to focus on squats, pulls, presses, things like that. If you've only got 90 minutes, I suggest doing accessories, say, 1 to 2 times a week for 20 to 30 minutes. Unless there is a huge lagging area and you want to bring that up, you can do it more often. But focusing on learning the snatch and learning the clean and jerk and putting a lot of time and effort into it is where your biggest return is going to be. That's it from me, guys. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you liked it, click like, click subscribe, tell me what you want to see next, and I'll see you in the next video.